Hey everyone, it's Wednesday. I know we took a little bit of a break, but Matt and I are back to recap yesterday's city council meeting. How are you doing today, boss?
I'm doing well, Liz. I got out for a bike ride this morning with the Silicon Valley Bicycle Coalition. We took a little tour around part of District 10, all around Marshall Cottle, Vista Park, and 87, checking out different bike lanes and some of the infrastructure and trail connections. And so it was very educational, and any day I can get out on the bike in the morning is a good day.
Yeah, I know you've already walked the district knocking on all those doors, so you've biked it too.
That's right. Yeah,
right,
how are you doing?
All right. I honestly am this is inside baseball, but I'm really excited about your memo about hopefully improving Granicus. But let's
start there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so that came up yesterday on the agenda. So I've had a couple of memos recently. Granicus, which is what Liz just mentioned, is the tool that we use for agenda management and streaming. It's one of the tools we use for streaming our meetings. So without getting into too much detail, I've written a couple of memos related to what we call hybrid meetings. So as we come out of this pandemic and more of us are working out of City Hall, wanting to ensure that our meetings continue to be accessible to the public via Zoom. And so, that's not rocket science, but the city does have a lot of facilities that it needs to outfit with the right cameras. And we've got some larger rooms, which are a little more complicated. So anyway, we're trying to figure out how to make sure all of our public meetings for all of our commissions and boards and council are accessible and work well, both in person and for a remote audience. And then the other component of this on the agenda management side is the tool is still lacking. So weird things happen, like when you want to download a staff memo as a member of the public or member of our team, it downloads and it doesn't just open in the browser, which is just it's just slow, it's clunky, it's harder to share. So
folder is a disaster.
yeah, it's a pain. So anyway, we're just trying to optimize the technology, and we're making some progress on that front.
Yeah. Speaking of progress, we're making some progress on street paving. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so yesterday we approved a $2.8 million contract for a lot of street paving in the city. Each district has about 25 miles per year that's getting paved right now, thanks to Measure T, Measure B, and the gas tax increasing to kind of bring it more in line with inflation. So even with all of that funding and the 25 miles per year per district that we are repairing and in many cases completely repaving, we're still falling behind citywide about 10 million a year in terms of the maintenance needs. So we have a deferred maintenance backlog that is still accumulating, but at a much slower rate. And I've been talking to city staff about how do we close that completely. We're digging our way as best as we can out of a hole that's hundreds of millions of dollars and probably another 6 or 7 years to actually get closer to where we want our road pavement conditions to be. Yeah. So, for our district, I should just highlight for this year, I'm sure it's already obvious to people who live in the area, but Trinidad, Leland Park Drive, a lot of the neighborhood around Country Club and Pierce Ranch in that area will be paved this year. A lot of it has been paved already. Up in the Vista Park area, Massachusetts Drive is being paved. So there's a lot going on.
Yeah, it pays to walk and bike the district. I just saw street names, but you know exactly where they are. All right, so I think one of the meatiest things you all talked about last night, and as someone who grew up on one side of 101 and lives on the other side, I found very compelling, was the assessment of fair housing. So I'm going to share, I think, the graphic that says more than we ever could, if you want to jump into that.
Sure, yeah. So this is an annual assessment of fair housing that I think is driven by some HUD policy, so federal policy. HUD is Housing and Urban Development. And Liz, I don't know if you can make that graphic a little larger. It's a little hard to see there, but as you do that, I'll describe what we're looking at. So, basically, this was driven by housing policy, and what you're looking at is a map of the city with the distribution of population by race and ethnicity. And you can see pretty clearly there along the 101, the kind of the north-south line axis of the city, that the white non-Hispanic population is largely on the western side of that dividing line, and our Latino and much of the Asian population in San Jose is on the eastern side of that dividing line. And there's a long historical legacy here. I think as most of us know, American cities, and we're no exception, were explicitly segregated, largely driven by federal policy. Not that people didn't in the community didn't also maybe want that segregation, but federal policy going back about 100 years actually explicitly created racial segregation in American cities. And you're seeing that legacy today, and it's about more than housing, of course. That determines funding for schools and the quality of those schools and infrastructure. I used to teach out in East Side San Jose, where most of our lower performing public schools are. And while this was before my time, I know from speaking to residents that whole areas of East Side, didn't have roads that were paved or sidewalks or streetlights for a very long time, much longer than was true on the western side of the city. So, we had a pretty robust conversation last night about this legacy, and I think there was no explicit action taken. This was just a report, though. The housing department is planning to come back with some recommendations for how we address this legacy, which is part of an ongoing conversation we're having. And I think we have to find ways to both provide high quality services to all residents while also making targeted strategic investments in lifting up communities that have been historically marginalized and disinvested in. And I really think that can be a win-win for everyone in the city. Overall, a city that is safer and cleaner and more vibrant and better educated, and that is all good stuff that benefits all of us. We're all interdependent. That doesn't mean I'm going to agree with every single policy that our housing department brings forward. I think I've mentioned many times that the academic research says to me that policies like rent control are really a mixed bag. They have benefits, they also have costs. And so I'm going to continue to be very thoughtful about the specific policy solutions that we discuss under this heading. But we had an interesting conversation about the legacy of segregation in our community and some of the downstream effects of that. Really important conversation, and one we're going to continue to have, and we'll continue to keep you all updated on the kinds of policy solutions that staff is recommending.
Excellent. So because we weren't able to share a recap back when Downtown West and everything was approved, and there was a little bit of an update about that for Sharks fans like me yesterday, let's finish with that.
Yeah, so 2 weeks ago, we approved the development agreement for Downtown West, which is the Google campus all around Diridon Station, which is really an exciting milestone for our entire city. This is going to bring 20,000 jobs, 4,000 housing units, 25% of which will be affordable to people at a wide range of kind of lower to middle income residents. And it's all around transit, our biggest transit station, which I think in the long run is going to be the most important transit hub on the entire West Coast. And wonderfully, it's all being built, or most of it's being built on surface parking lots and kind of empty land. So it's not a massive disruption or displacement. Sadly, tragically, the immediately after we passed it around 11:30 at night, I believe, and then the next morning had the horrible shooting at the VTA light rail yard. So we ended up not recording our council meeting, this recap video 2 weeks ago, and then we didn't have a council meeting last week because of the holiday. But just wanted to highlight for folks that did move forward. The project is on track. It's going to have a lot of benefits, including for all of our neighborhoods because of the increased tax revenue that will help us to pave more roads and hire more police officers and do whatever, provide other city services. I will just note, since you mentioned the arena, and this was a topic that we voted on last night, the city, Google, and the Sharks Management Corporation have come to an agreement in writing about how we will communicate and make decisions together to ensure that the project goes forward in a way that doesn't disrupt business at the arena. And we have committed to, as we are on the hook for, frankly, providing adequate parking for patrons of events at the arena. So that has finally, and it's not, certainly we're going to continue to work through this. I'm sure there will be challenges, but at least conceptually and actually now in writing, we have an agreement on how we're going to all work together to ensure that the arena continues to operate effectively, and we don't inconvenience fans and patrons any more than absolutely necessary. So that's good news.
Yeah. As a Sharks fan for God, almost 30 years now, we may not be in the playoffs again, but I still consider this a win. I didn't want to lose them, so I'll take this.
Yeah, it's definitely it's good news all around. So yeah, anything else you wanted to check in on?
No, that's all my notes. We'll be back next week. I've looked at the agenda already. It's long, so buckle up.
Yeah, so I'll have an extra cup of coffee after the meeting next week.
Yeah.
So thanks, appreciate the time, Liz, and wish everybody a great rest of the week.
See you later.